Oh, did you hear that? What did I tell you? That's a win for HistoryLegends, confirmed by Prigozhin himself.
В ЧВК «Вагнер» ценится то, какой ты боец, и, собственно говоря, тебя ценят по твоим яйцам, по твоему мозгу.
Essentially, Wagner's not looking for vegan, gluten-free, lactose-free, courage-free soy boys. They don't want berry pickers, they want the hunters.
У нас есть контракт. Контракт с компанией. Контракт с Родиной. Мы знаем, что попадем в ад. Но в аду мы будем лучшими.
My friends, exactly 1 year ago, on the 24th of February 2022, Russia launched its large-scale offensive against Ukraine. This sort of anniversary goes hand in hand with today's video. Part 2 of this exclusive interview between Yevgeny Prigozhin, the founder of the Wagner Private Military Corporation, and Russian war reporter WarGonzo. To get the full picture of this interview, I highly recommend you to also watch part 1, which I'll link in the description below. With the help of my team, I added English subtitles to the best of our abilities to this interview. That way you'll be able to make up your own mind of everything that was said by the founder of the very secretive Wagner PMC. Without further ado, let's go!
Я в том формате, что действительно есть ощущение, что вот ЧВК «Вагнер» это вот не просто подразделение, да, где там все там стали под козырек и так далее, что у подразделения есть некая как бы вот собственная идеология, собственный некий кодекс, да. Вот если коротко, да, там сформулировать, не растекаясь мыслью по древу, да, вот в чем идеология ЧВК «Вагнер»?
This is a very interesting question because we never had an answer from Wagner itself. We always had interpretations from outside. Also, why do some Russian veterans prefer to join Wagner than the Russian armed forces? There must be something. With that being said, this guy from my comment section said something really interesting. Essentially, he says that lots of Russians and guys from the former Soviet states like the Kazakhs and Uzbeks were joining Wagner after their contracts in the French Foreign Legion were up. Russians make up 5% of the French Foreign Legion, or roughly 450 men. This could be as high as 600 soldiers if we add up former Soviet republics apart from Ukrainians. So yeah, this contingent of essentially NATO-trained troops could definitely bring their military experience to Wagner, but it's still a relatively limited number of people in the grand scheme of things.
Такая сразу сложная история, да? Идеология ЧВК «Вагнер» в том, что это коллектив, в котором есть идеальное управление, скажем так, близкое к идеальному. Идеология в том, что каждый командир слышит своего бойца снизу. Идеология в том, что есть возможность расти вверх столько, сколько тебе, пока до потолка не упрешься. Идеология в том, что ты человек с повышенным количеством адреналина, который нужен своему коллективу и своей стране.
Essentially, he says that Wagner is based on meritocracy and not seniority. Any capable soldier that demonstrates the necessary skills and abilities can easily rise through the ranks and become commander himself, whatever his age or background. And this is essentially what made the armies of the French Revolution so powerful. You could have the son of a shopkeeper just rise through the ranks and end up replacing a career officer and lead the brigade into battle just because he demonstrated the necessary military skills. And this is the talented officer corps that Napoleon inherited. Meanwhile, in the US Army, in order to command an entire brigade, the promotion to colonel takes about 22 years. We know that Alexei Negin enlisted as a simple trooper in 2017, and 4 or 5 years later, by 2022, he became a higher-ranking battlefield commander for Wagner. I get the feeling that Wagner has the same mentality as Special Forces. High training, high cohesion, and high-tech equipment. This Wagner army battling in Bakhmut would be similar as if the United States regrouped all Green Berets, Rangers, Navy SEALs, MARSOC into one elite, beefed-up army corps. Wagner is like a German World War II Kampfgruppe or an American task force. It has its own drones, artillery, tanks, and aviation. Communication among every branch is very quick. They react extremely fast to any situation, which means they can quickly exploit weak points and gaps in enemy defenses. And this maneuver warfare on a tactical skill can only be done with a concentration of forces, speed, as well as top-tier coordination.
И я обращал внимание на довольно специфическое отношение к смерти, да, что вот быть воином, жить вечно, вот эти все как бы фразы в наш обиход пришли как бы именно от ребят ЧВКшников, да. Действительно ли так? Действительно вот культ бесстрашия, такое пренебрежение к смерти, что ли, это действительно вот...
Циничного отношения к смерти.
Все-таки циничного отношения, да? Вот вы так сказали.
Да, наверное, да?
Смерть это не конец, это всего лишь начало чего-то другого.
Да.
To me, this seems like a very religious reference. What do you think?
Мы все попадем в ад, но в аду мы будем лучше.
Абсолютно.
Ну, вы процитировали
В аду будем лучшими,
как
да.
раз, да, фразу из фильма. И
The movie they're referring to is called The Best in Hell. It's a war movie produced by Wagner, and I made an entire analysis about it. If you're interested, the link will be in the description below.
я так понимаю, что как раз события, ну, вот, проецируются одновременно и на то, что в Мариуполе происходило, и на то, что здесь в Северодонецке, в Попасной. Нет, картина на самом деле похожа.
Нет, события мы делали все чисто попасное.
Oh, did you hear that? What did I tell you? When doing my research on the movie, many Russian commentators said, yeah, it depicts the Battle of Mariupol, Severodonetsk. I was like, no way! Just look at the map! That's Popasna! In the end, I'm pretty sure the movie portrays the Battle of Popasna. I spent enough time reporting on this battle that I immediately recognized the map behind the presenter. That's a win for HistoryLegends, confirmed by Prigozhin himself.
Возвращаясь к Кувалде, да, очень, конечно, много было и разговоров, очень противоречивых отзывов. Я вам честно признаюсь, да, вот мы общаемся так открыто, откровенно, пожалуй, первый раз, да, у меня тоже не однозначное отношение к этому. Конечно, я тоже считаю, что предателей нужно карать, да, нужно их там находить. Нужно их ликвидировать, они несут действительно там экзистенциальную угрозу безопасности
Я сразу
и так далее.
я вообще не в курсе, о чем мы говорим.
Вот эта вся история там по поводу того, что...
Вообще не в курсе.
Я понял.
Да, я знаю.
Essentially, in early November, there was this story that some Wagner fighter tried to surrender to the Ukrainians, but he was caught. And as a punishment, Wagner smashed his head with a sledgehammer. And then again in February with a 55-year-old man named Dmitry Yakushenko. Well, apparently it was all fake, since the guy that was allegedly executed is now standing right next to Prigozhin, and he seems completely fine. Essentially, the guy simply returned to Wagner after a prisoner exchange. But you can see this is a brilliant example of a disinformation campaign. I think Prigozhin pushed this fake story to scare the convicts that would join Wagner just to find an opportunity to surrender to the Ukrainians. And I think it worked, because in my research I read a lot of interviews with inmates and their families. And the story of the sledgehammer came back very often, and many guys changed their minds just because of it. And in a way, now that Wagner is not interested in recruiting inmates anymore, well, he just revealed the truth about this story.
Я знаю, что есть кувалда, красивый инструмент, символ такой.
Только так.
Да, все.
Ну, Евгений Викторович именно так посчитал.
Молот Тора.
Молот Тора.
Молот Тора. А, кстати, вот сейчас тут упомянули Тора, да? А вы сам православный человек или нет? Или это секрет?
Ну, я православный человек, но, как у меня мама говорит, можно быть православным, но не выцерковлен.
This reminds me of the story when two Wagnerians were captured by ISIS in September 2017. Apparently, the two captives were executed because presumably they refused to reject their Christian Orthodox faith, reject Russia, become Muslim and join ISIS. And this Orthodox theme is also very present in Wagner's movie The Best in Hell. In one scene, an Orthodox religious icon falls on the floor. A yellow soldier picks it up and makes the sign of the cross. Once the Russians clear the room, that same icon falls once again on the ground. A white soldier picks it up, and he also makes the sign of the cross. Welcome to History Legends. Here are the latest news of the Russo-Ukrainian war. Remember that if you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. And as you know, just like with many other commentators, some of my Ukraine videos have been targeted with limited or no ads. So make sure to subscribe to my Patreon or PayPal to keep the show running. Thank you to everyone that has already helped. And welcome to the headquarters.
Я знаю, что есть кувалда, красивый инструмент, символ такой.
Только так.
Да, все.
Ну, Евгений Викторович именно так посчитал.
Молот Тора.
Молот Тора.
Oh my god, that was kind of awkward. I feel bad for WarGonzo. We feel how uncomfortable he is. I mean, he's probably surrounded by half a dozen heavily armed guards full of tattoos on their faces, their hands on their AKs, and the moment he moves too much...
Такие, конечно, вы человек откровенно критикующий иногда действующую систему там, управления войсками и так далее. Возвращаясь, да, все-таки к этой теме, я слышал много откровенно таких жестких высказываний по поводу действий там, отдельных наших военачальников. Сейчас не вижу смысла перечислять какие-то конкретные фамилии. Да, но в целом, вот, конечно, на ваш взгляд, конкретно на сегодняшний день, да, насколько в плане управления войсками ситуация критическая, что, наверное, хотелось бы вам изменить лучше.
This is also very interesting because WarGonzo acknowledges that the Russian army has a lot of problems. The latest battles, for example, on the Zaporozhye front or Soledar shows exactly that. Or even the fact that the Russians are seemingly in their big winter offensive, but the progress is still very slow. So there must be a problem somewhere. However, in my opinion, the real thing they're talking about is a beef that dates back October 2022, when Prigozhin heavily criticized Russian General Alexander Lapin for abandoning the town of Liman, calling him incompetent, accusing him of commanding the troops while being far from the front himself, without looking at the actual situation on the ground, without making sure his men had everything they needed to defend the place. However, after being sacked, Lapin returned in January as head of Russia's ground forces. And since the interview, there was a second beef actually, when Prigozhin called out Defense Minister Shoigu and the Chief of the General Staff Gerasimov by claiming they withheld important artillery ammunition just to spite him. Prigozhin said that because of this action, dozens of his men were KIA in front of Bakhmut by lack of artillery support. However, since then it was announced that the shipment of ammunition has reached Wagner forces.
Первое, что должно быть в войсках верхи должны когда-то увидеть низы. И поэтому, если генерал зайдет в окоп, пообщается с солдатами, то солдаты, честно говоря, в нынешней ситуации просто охуеют и будут очень рады.
For those that have been deployed abroad, what was the impact of having a high-ranking general visit you on the front line? Was it beneficial or just a nuisance? Essentially, Prigozhin wants Russian commanders to lead by example. This is why he went as close as possible to the front in the eastern outskirts of Bakhmut to congratulate his troops in person. What he wants to happen is exactly what the governor of Primorsky Krai Oblast did. The governor arrived at the position of the 83rd Separate Guards Air Assault Brigade, walked through the trenches, talked to the soldiers, and brought copters, sights, thermal imagers, and other things needed by the soldiers at the front. I personally think meritocracy is very important. We often blame the troops on the ground by saying, yeah, they have no morale, punish deserters, and all this. But it is also very important to be extremely harsh with negligent and poor military commanders. Here's a telling historical example. In Normandy, 5 days after landing, the US 19th Infantry Division was in shambles. We're talking about one infantry company that began the day with 142 men and finished it with 32. Or a battalion of 265 American soldiers that simply surrendered to a German patrol of 50 men. From June to late July, the division had lost all its infantrymen, requesting replacements of more than 100%. Now, why was this division so underperforming? On June 12, 1944, the Brigadier General of the 19th Division, McKelvey, was nowhere to be found. Why? Because he was sheltering from enemy fire, curled up in a ditch. When the divisional assistant, Williams, eventually found him, the assistant yelled at him and told him to get the hell out of this hole and go back to his command post. But the brigadier general did not move, so his division remained passive and bogged down. The next day, the corps commander was so mad that he went to the front himself. When he saw McKelvey, he relieved him from the command on the spot. He ordered the new brigadier general of the division, called Landrum, to fire the commanders of 2 out of 3 regiments. But the division did not fare much better because Landrum would also be fired a couple weeks later. So did the assistant Williams and 14 other high-ranking commanders of the 19th Division. Only then did the 19th Division become a strong fighting force. It became stronger as incompetent career commanders got replaced by talented junior officers. And this is what Prigozhin blames on the Russian military. It's too rigid. You cannot grow through the ranks. Many commanders don't deserve their rank and position. Poor military commanders are never punished and just stay in position, and also rose through the ranks according to their loyalty and allegiance to the regime.
И даже этого уже будет достаточно для того, чтобы они еще больше поверили в себя, правильно?
И уже этого будет достаточно, чтобы они поняли, что они не одни сидят со своими проблемами. И поэтому, когда я приезжаю к своим, они понимают о том, что я не некое оторванное существо, где-то находящееся. Абсолютно верно. И поэтому все командиры в ЧВК «Вагнер» это бывшие штурмовики, которые своим трудом заслужили быть командирами.
In other words, it would be as if in Star Wars you would start as a stormtrooper and level up to become one of Darth Vader's generals within 4 years. Once again, Prigozhin blames the Russian military for having too many commanders for having too many desk job commanders by rose through the ranks with seniority and simply by filing paperwork, that are more worried about the next yacht they'll use in Turkey than the well-being of their troops. But another reason why Prigozhin put so much emphasis on starting at the bottom
started from the bottom, now my whole team fucking here,
is that he himself started his business empire by selling hot dogs with his father on the streets of St. Petersburg, before owning multiple supermarkets and restaurants.
Евгений Викторович, тоже наверняка слышали, и хотелось бы ваши комментарии личные на этот счет. Вот определенного рода такой тоже есть флер, слухи, не слухи, что значит среди бойцов Вагнера есть немало поклонников, не знаю каков их процент точно, так называемых, да, там различных атрибутик и Третьего Рейха.
Is it possible that some Wagner guys show off some NASA symbols? Most probably. I haven't seen many pictures or footage of this, but I know it exists. So once again, perhaps Ukrainians and Russians have much more in common than the West wants to admit. Look at this video of Ukrainian soldiers. However, I do find very hypocritical the coverage of the Western media. Back in the days, they made a bunch of documentaries on these evil far-right groups. But now they are friends, it's fine. Just la la la. A bit further in the video, Prigozhin also blames the hypocrisy on the Russian side.
Если там поклонники, ну мы про Ленина говорили, да?
Да.
Если там поклонники там революционных каких-то процессов, да, сегодня в нашей стране не наблюдаем. Не наблюдаем.
He finds it hypocritical that in Russia it's tolerated to be a fan of the Bolshevik era, to talk about Lenin harboring the hammer and sickle, the red flag, despite all the pain that communism has inflicted on Russia. All this is tolerated, but German World War II stuff?
everyone loses their minds.
And many times we saw Russian forces harbor the red banner, and not the Russian flag after storming Lysychansk. With that being said, now that I think about it, I haven't seen many non-Eastern European Slav recruits in the ranks of the Wagner PMC. At the same time, we know that Muslim Chechens and Ingush were part of Wagner in Syria as well, so yeah. With all their faces covered up, honestly it's hard to tell, but we do see one Wagnerian that seems to be from Central Asia.
В то же время я лично от вас слышал и читал так довольно, скажем, мне кажется, откровенный пассаж о том, что вы сожалеете о том, что когда-то в начале 90-х были по ту сторону баррикад во время развала Советского Союза, что сейчас понимаете, что действительно было там большая...
Не думал, что кто-то это прочитал.
Не, я прочитал, да. И прочитал очень внимательно, и мне кажется, это на самом деле, много о вас говорит.
They referred to the 1991 Soviet coup attempt, where at one point Prigozhin wrote an article saying he regrets siding with the Democrats behind the barricades, against the army, against the communist leadership.
Вот,
да.
Есть такие
и про
люди,
Третий Рейх.
Да. Действительно есть такие люди радикально правых взглядов здесь, или если они есть, они этого не показывают. Хочется...
Да, смотрите, любой человек, который идет в ЧВК «Вагнер», он должен иметь достаточное количество мужества, адреналина, и у него должны быть достаточные яйца для того, чтобы пойти под пули и убивать врага. В ЧВК «Вагнер» ценится то, какой ты боец, то, насколько ты предан своим друзьям и своему коллективу. И, собственно говоря, тебя ценят по твоим яйцам, по твоему мозгу. Что тебе нравится? Тебе нравится символика Третьего Рейха, у тебя наколото 55 черепов на всех местах, звезды не встану на колени, не одены погоны или еще что-нибудь, абсолютно наплевать. И сколько у кого татуировок на теле, это твоя личная проблема. Самое главное, как ты будешь со своим товарищем по оружию, как ты будешь вести себя в бою. И если мы сейчас будем включать какие-то дополнительные ограничения, то это просто разрушит все.
Ну, ваше личное отношение.
Мое личное отношение, каждый дрочит так, как ему нравится. Самое главное, чтобы этот человек выполнял ту задачу, которая стоит перед ним, шел вперед. Безусловно, на вопрос.
Essentially, Wagner is not looking for vegan, gluten-free, lactose-free, courage-free soy boys. They don't want berry pickers, they want the hunters. Even if they're a bit... Say hello to my little friend! They want tough guys that are not scared to storm enemy positions. Whatever their political ideology is, as long as they can work as part of a team. In a way, the Bundeswehr should learn this lesson from Wagner. Did you see how much the German government cracks down on far-right groups within the German military? And then they wonder why nobody wants to join their army. It's true, the few Germans willing to enlist, willing to sacrifice their life for Germany, let's be honest, might be influenced, sympathetic to certain ideals.
Евгений Викторович, надолго мы здесь с вами?
Can you believe that it's now been a year? Nobody would have expected the war to last that long.
Мы основу тогда берем, да? Началась специальная военная операция, так назовем. В принципе, войн на земле не было, там, грубо говоря, с 1945 года, да?
Вот такого масштаба.
Да, Афганистан это была погоня за аборигенами, Сирия была, все считают это, все ребята согласны, погоня за аборигенами.
When Wagner mercenaries were deployed in Syria from 2016 to 2018, they mostly fought against ISIS insurgents in the desert, which basically had no artillery or anti-air capabilities. Because of that, Wagner casualties were also relatively low. Then Wagner went on to fight in Libya, Mozambique, and lastly in the Central African Republic, always against low-tech Toyota-mounted insurgents. Meanwhile, the war in Ukraine has proved to be a completely different league. Conventional wars and guerrilla wars are two different kinds of wars.
И поэтому в мире таких войн, как сейчас, не было с 1945 года. И когда я сравниваю Soledar и Сталинград, я не был в Сталинграде. Я видел картинки, видел разрушения. И я понимаю, что в Солидаре голову поднять трудно.
Comparing Soledar to Stalingrad is a bit of a stretch. It's like comparing your local OF girl to Riley Reid. It's not the same league.
Я, честно говоря, до Солидара не доезжал, но я был много где еще. Да. И я прекрасно понимаю, о чем идет речь. Я их называю, это уже города-близнецы. Абсолютно. Они на самом деле мало чем отличаются, потому что интенсивность боевых действий...
Да, и количество снарядов, которое вылетает, оно значительно больше, чем то, что вылетало в Сталинграде.
However, it is reasonable to say that Bakhmut is a modern-day equivalent of the Battle of Stalingrad. In the last month of the Battle of Stalingrad alone, the Soviets fired 911,000 artillery shells, or an average of 30,000 per day, while in Bakhmut, Wagner and Russian artillery is averaging 15 to 17,000 shells per day. So when Prigozhin says that his army fires 2 times the amount of shells fired at Stalingrad, it's a bit of a stretch, it's more the other way around. However, by the amount of forces involved, the amount of destruction and firepower, we can definitely say that Bakhmut and Stalingrad are twin cities. Also simply because of this attempt to encircle the Ukrainian army there, and of the political focus to hold the city at all costs.
И поэтому, безусловно, люди погибают, и у нас есть потери, но нам самое главное, чтобы у той стороны были потери в разы больше, чем у нас.
The Ukrainian side says exactly the same thing, so I don't know. Regarding the Battle of Soledar, in this video, this Wagnerian said, I quote, "The ratio of casualties was about 1 to 6 or 1 to 7 on the enemy's side, 7 for every one of ours." And it would make sense if we compare the amount of projectiles fired by each side.
Спецоперация началась. В эту спецоперацию мы отжали кусок Черного моря, перекрыли Азовское море, мы сделали себе сухопутный коридор в Крым. Не мы, а вот тогда, когда, как говорится, заскочили. На Дурика, не на Дурик, это уже отдельная история, да?
If we look objectively, this operation he mentioned is the single most decisive military operation of the Russian army in Ukraine. Within a few days, like in a blitzkrieg, they captured Kherson and Zaporozhye Oblast, created a land corridor between Crimea and the rest of Russia, and encircled Mariupol.
Насколько я понимаю, да, у каждого свое представление о спецоперации. Насколько я понимаю, нам надо закрыть Донецкую и Луганскую республику, и в принципе пока всех это устраивает. Потому что откуда спецоперация началась?
Did you just hear that? Prigozhin just revealed what is the actual objective of the Russian offensive. The political objective of Russia is to lock the Donbass, aka Donetsk and Luhansk republics. So this is their minimum condition for a win. That also means that when they claim that their only objective is to demilitarize Ukraine, it's just to cover up. Because you cannot measure that. But you certainly can measure territorial gains. And that's why Russia is focusing so much on Bakhmut, as it opens the path towards the last line of defense in Donbass. Perhaps then they will attempt to freeze the conflict. I don't know.
Теперь вопрос, надолго или нет. Если нам надо идти до Днепра, то тогда года на 3.
Wait, what? So they're actually considering this option? To conquer the entire east bank of the Dnieper? 3 more years? Oh.
Если нам надо закрыть ДНР, ЛНР, ну, надо еще хотя бы годика 1,5-2 поработать.
And 1 or 2 years to secure the Donbass? Oh my god, we're in it for a while. I pity you because you'll see this face quite a lot.
Еще раз всем спасибо. Пишите свои вопросы, если у меня будет еще возможность. Я надеюсь, что она рано или поздно возникнет. Я в том числе и ваши вопросы тоже постараюсь задать Евгению Викторовичу. Еще раз спасибо.
Да.
Не отвлекая нас всех от тяжелой фронтовой работы.
Спасибо.
This is all I have for you today. Let me know in the comment section what you thought of my analysis. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to support my work, make sure to check out my Patreon or PayPal. The links are in the description below.